Good afternoon. Hi, folks, and welcome to today's edition of the Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar Series. We've got a treat for you today. So our usual host, Dr. Matt Helmers, is actually going to be our presenter. So I'm jumping in. I'm Ann Stout. I'm Conservation Outreach Specialist. I will be your host, and you've got a treat with Dr. Matt Helmers as your presenter. So Dr. Helmers, as you know, he is a professor in the Department of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering here at Iowa State University, director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and collaborator with the Iowa Learning Farms Project. And today, excited to jump in as we take a look at a unique situation with several years of drought under our belts here. Dr. Helmers is going to explore nitrate leaching and what the implications look like following several dry years. Now that we've gotten some rain, what does that look like? So he'll be sharing some of the field research that his team has collected, and look forward to diving into what the water quality implications look like following a drought. So a few housekeeping items. Many of you are familiar with this, having been part of our webinar series before, but we are anticipating about a 25-minute presentation. While the presentation is going on, feel free to submit any questions that you have in the chat. Submit those over to me, and then I will relay those to Dr. Helmers at the conclusion of the presentation. So with that, without any further ado, I will turn the floor over to Matt.
Thanks, Ann. I'm looking forward to talking today, but I enjoy being the moderator better than giving the presentation. I don't know if it's going to be a treat for anybody, but I will say, I told somebody this morning that actually it was fun kind of pulling this data together. So I said yes to giving the webinar and then had to pull the data together. And as I did that, I was like, man, I shouldn't have said yes, but it was fun to pull it together. And so as folks know, we are coming off some drier conditions, and we had some excess precipitation in the spring of 2024 that led to subsurface drainage. And so have working on, I'm going to show you some information from two of our sites. And I chose these two sites in part because we have a long data history. So the 5 sites that are shown on this map, the Northwest Research Farm, ADW, Northeast Research Farm, Cobb's, and the Surf site are all ones I've been involved with during my career at Iowa State. And specifically the ADW and the Cobb's most recently have had a lot of data. I'll kind of highlight at least a discussion with Dan Anderson, who's leading most of our efforts at the Northeast Research Farm site now, kind of similarities and differences that he's seen this year. So both ADW and Cobb's, another reason to look at those is that they have, in the case of the ADW site, our first year of monitoring was 1990. And for Cobb's, the first year of monitoring was 2010. So, we have about 35 years for ADW and 15 for Cobb's. And both of those sites, we would include 2012 into the 2013 time period. So I thought that was kind of maybe useful to compare and contrast what we've seen in 2024 coming off 2023 versus 2012 and 2013. So, Ann is moderating, and she's going to be really frustrated with me because I'm going to show a lot of graphs. And Ann says, don't show so many graphs. But I need to this time, but not many pieces of information on each slide. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting this to advance. Okay, just most folks have probably heard me present and talk about our drainage systems. This is just an example of how we monitor our systems. We have individually tiled drain plots. In this case, this is showing the ADW site, which 50-foot wide, 125-foot long. We monitor a center tile line down each of those plots and assume it collects water from 25 feet on either side. That water dumps into a sump. That water is pumped out with a garden variety sump pump. There's a flow meter in line that measures how much water flow we're pumping from each of those plots. And then there's an orifice in line that with the back pressure in the pipe forces a small portion of that water into a sample container that we're able to, the group is able to go out and collect water samples from routinely, at least on a weekly basis. Okay, so what have we seen at our ADW site? Overall, if we look at since 1990 to 2024, our annual precipitation is on average, whatever that average is, but the long-term average is about 28 inches. And what we see is that in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, we had, well, average in 2023, but well below in 2020 through 2022. And then this 2024 is just up through early August that we were, kind of probably right about on track. Now it's been dry since then, but most of this rain came in April through June. Also notice again, this 2012, we were down about 20 to 21 inches, so below normal in that year as well. So one of the downsides of that low rainfall is that even in 2023, when we got a what we might say is about average annual rainfall, most of that came in the spring, and then it was very dry, and we were coming off of a dry year. So we got only about 1 inch of drainage each of the last 4 years at that Gilmore City site. So as we'll show, as I'll show in the next slide, very little nitrate loss from the soil profile in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 20, 21, 22, and 23, excuse me. But then we did get, we have had about 7 to 8 inches of drainage in 2024. Those were the forest dry years, forest lowest drainage years since that 2012 period. You also notice back in the mid 1990s, there was a period of also quite low drainage years in general. But so 2024, we had drainage, and we're coming off 4 years with hardly any drainage. And as we look then at the annual nitrate loss, now what I'm showing you in these next few slides is the nitrate loss combined from a corn soybean cropping system where the corn is fertilized in the spring, what I'd say early season side dress, at 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. So, and actually this whole period from 1990 to 2024 had essentially the same nitrogen management to corn in the corn soybean rotation, between 150 to 160 pounds of N per acre per year to the corn, and this is the combined loss from the corn soybean system. So you'll notice that we lost really less than a pound or two a year for 4 straight years from 2020 through 2023. Now this year we're up to about 16 pounds lost so far through early August. The previous year with that low loss was 2012, and then we saw an increase in 2013 up to about 44 pounds per acre of loss. All right, so this is the load, excuse me. I think the concentration is always also important to look at. So because this loss is really driven by how much water flow, but what did we see from concentrations? Because we heard a lot about that this spring as we think about Des Moines Water Works and treating water that they're pulling from the Raccoon River. So the flow-weighted nitrate concentrations for this whole period are shown here from 1990 through 2024. Again, the same, essentially the same nitrogen management or cropping system management over this whole period. The only thing that's changing are crop genetics and the precipitation or weather patterns that we have. you'll notice out of this 35-year period, the highest nitrate concentration was in 2013, which was that year following the 2012 drought. Interestingly, in 2024, we did not see as much of an increase in nitrate concentration as what we did back between that 2012 and 2013 timeframe. That was a little interesting to me as I started to pull this data. I would have expected, all things being equal, maybe a little greater increase in 2024, and we did not see that to date at our Gilmore City site or our ADW site. So you'll notice again that we went from about 15 in 2012 up to 21 in 2013. Between 2013, we went from about 7 to 10. So there, again, was an increase, but not as much as what we saw in between 2012 and 2013. Oh. Okay, one of the things started to think about with this as well was what was the corn yield or kind of our crop yield that previous year? Might that have influenced residual nitrate in the profile? And one of the things that we did see was in 2012, we did see at least lower crop yields compared to 2023. So in 2012, I think it was about 140 to 145 bushel per acre for that corn crop versus last year we had about 190. So that might have impacted how much residual N was in the profile that could be susceptible to loss in the spring of the year. One of the other things that that I think about with the drought and thinking about that in both of these cases we did see an increase in nitrate. It just wasn't as great in 2024. But what can we do to mitigate that? And so fortunately at that Gilmore City site, we have a winter cereal rye cover crop that this system dating back to 2011 that we started that. Both of these have the same nitrogen management. And one of the things that we see is that both in 2013 and in 2024, where we saw that increase in nitrate concentration from our combined corn soybean cropping system, we didn't see as great an increase, or we didn't see an increase at all where we had a winter cereal rye cover crop. So really illustrates, I think, as we think about, this weather variability and the potential for dry conditions followed by potentially wet springs, I think cover crops can be a very effective in-field practice for us to mitigate or reduce that risk of increased nitrate concentrations. And then one of the other things, this is a little bit, the next couple graphs are a little bit busy, so I apologize for that, but I thought some folks might be interested to see kind of the individual nitrate concentration with time for the different treatments. The circles here are are without cover crop. So soybean is the solid circle, corn the open circle, and then either the right side or upside down triangle is soybean with cover crop or corn with cover crop. What's interesting, and I'll show this similar in 2024, is that corn with cover crop. So it would have corn with cover crop in 2013. Those plots would have been soybean in 2012. We would seed the cover crop in the fall of 2012, and then there would be some growth in the fall and then growth in the spring, and then termination of that cover crop about 10 days before corn planting. In general, there would be less cover crop growth before that corn crop than before soybean, but in both of these cases, we saw that cover crop do a really good job of reducing the nitrate concentration. So this open triangles here is the corn with cover crop, and the open circle is the corn without cover crop. And we saw that, very apparent in 2013 in reducing that concentration following or where we had the corn cover crop, corn following the cover crop, excuse me. And then we saw the kind of similar pattern here in 2024 that the open circles are the corn, in this case, the corn plots, what is corn in 2024, and then the open triangle is the corn with cover crops. So both periods, cover crops after corn were quite effective in reducing nitrate concentration out of our drainage systems, both in that 23 to 24 period and then 2012 into 23 period. Okay, so now we're going to look at our Cobb site. A little less data, but still pretty fortunate with the period of record that we do have. And again, you'll notice 2012 through 2024, drier in all those years below 30 inches of precipitation. In comparison, most of the previous 6 years were above 30 inches of precipitation. So this is what the precipitation looks like at Cobb's. If we look at our drainage, we not quite as dry at our Cobb site compared to ADW. That in the last 2012 to 2023, we had anywhere from about 0 inches of drainage up to 5. So a little bit more drainage than what we saw at ADW. You'll notice 2010 was our wettest as far as how much drainage we got. Some of you may remember that was the year Ames flooded and Hilton Coliseum flooded. Here we have, again, 2012 was down about 3 inches of drainage, and then 6 in 2013. So in general, last few years, relatively dry in comparison to some of the prior 10 years. And then again, on the drainage side, or nitrate loss, excuse me, this is the nitrate loss. Last year, we lost about 4 pounds of nitrogen per acre, versus this year, we lost about 12 so far. And actually, this is up to the middle of July is when we stopped getting drainage at this site. So again, we've increased threefold the amount of nitrate that we've lost, but still, less than what we saw lost in 2013 or 14 or 15 or 2010. As we look at concentrations, and here I'm going to follow through, in this case, the soybean crop is the circle, the corn crop is the upside down triangle. And what we saw was that specifically in 2013, we saw a spike when we were getting drainage from in the soybean year, which is a little different than what we've seen here in 2024. So I guess, again, in 2024, at least where we have corn this year, so it would have been soybeans in 2023, we see, a fair bit of increase in the nitrate concentration from about 10 milligrams per liter up to about 15, again, for that corn phase of the rotation following the soybean phase. One of the things to note, maybe as we think about this soybean year in 2013, sorry to jump around with slides, but this soybean year in 2013, that would have been corn in 2012. And again, I kind of commented about at ADW that perhaps one of the factors why we saw more of an increase in 2013 at that site was, depressed crop yields in 2012. We definitely saw, a crop yield difference between, say, 2012 and 2023. So in 2012, there was about 160 to 170 bushel corn. In that year, there was about 190 pounds of nitrogen applied to that corn crop in 2012. So if we got slightly lower yields with a higher N rate, there may have been more residual nitrate left in the profile for that soybean phase of the system in 2013. We compare that to 2023, where our corn yield, despite it being a little bit drier year, we still had almost 250 in that case, 250 bushel corn, and we had applied 160 pounds of nitrogen in that year. So maybe a bit less residual nitrate left in the profile, susceptible to loss. So I think some of that, the decrease being less in 2024 could be that in many areas we got better crop yield in 2023 than what we did in 2012. And that does illustrate that, as I was going to mention, Dr. Anderson has some work at the Northeast Research Farm. And what they've seen is they have seen a bigger spike in nitrate concentration in 2024. But in last year, they saw really depressed crop yields. That was probably the driest area of the state. And they saw really depressed crop yields at that site. Such that there may have been more residual nitrate in the profile. So thinking about the yield impacts and how that may impact what we see following a drought is important. If that drought was great enough that we see depressed yields, we may see a higher increase in nitrate concentration that following year, or at a time when we ultimately get drainage. I wanted to highlight that we also have some continuous corn and continuous corn with cover crop at this Cobb site, and highlight that especially in 2024, when we got very good cover crop growth because of the kind of spring that we have, we saw a pretty dramatic decrease in nitrate concentration, or lower nitrate concentration, where we had that continuous corn with the winter cereal rye cover crop than where it was just the continuous corn without cover crop. So again, illustrating that cover crop can be very effective in mitigating some of the increase in nitrate concentration that we might expect to see. And again, just to highlight this, following through on those individual plots, the concentration from the specific times that they were collected, and you'll notice this 2020. Is that our cup? Yeah, the increase that we saw here in 2013, a bit more than in 2024. And then this is what we saw with the continuous corn and continuous corn with cover crop. Here's our continuous corn, the filled circle, continuous corn with cover crop, the open circle. And in both of those years, we did see some reduction when we had that winter cereal rye cover crop. So as I summarize what our data is, the nitrate concentrations in drainage water were greater following the dry years, but that increase, that at least at these two sites, that increase was greater in 2013 compared to 2024. And I think some of that may be due to some of the cash crop impacts, or the cash crop yields impacting subsequent nitrate concentrations. And at both sites, we did see that cover crops were effective in reducing that increase in nitrate concentration. Okay. One of the things I did want to bring up here was, we can also look at what was observed in the rivers. And so, two locations that date back to, that would cover this 2012 to 2013 time period up till now, would be the Raccoon. And so this is pulling data from the USGS website and from their continuous nitrate sensor. The one on the left is in North Raccoon near Sac City. The one on the right is the Raccoon River at Van Meter. So that would be just a bit upstream of Des Moines Waterworks. And so what we see is that, yes, the nitrate concentrations were increased here in 2024 compared to some of our previous years. But that, the absolute peak concentrations, highest concentrations were not as high as what we did see in 2013. So both at the North Raccoon near Sac City, those concentrations in 2013 got up to about 23, 24 parts per million. At the Raccoon River at Van Meter, up to about 20. This year it was about 18 at the North Raccoon at Sac City, and about 17, 18 at the Raccoon River at Van Meter. So just to kind of illustrate, what was seen at that at the river scale there. I want to acknowledge many graduate students and undergraduate students that helped with all of this data collection. Carl Peterson also has made everything go at both of these sites, specifically crop production at our ADW site, and then help with drainage at both sites. Funding support has been primarily provided by IDOLS at the ADW site, with some funding from NIFA in there as under Sustainable Corn project. And then at the Cobb site, we've had funding from NIFA, including the Sea Change, ConocoPhillips, Leopold Center, Department of Agronomy, and CALS at Iowa State. With that, that's my contact information. Definitely welcome questions or comments. And I don't know if you want to do this. Okay, you can do this, and I'll take a drink of coffee.
Take a breather,
wet
get
my
a drink.
whistle.
Sounds good. All right. And so we've had a number of questions come in already, which is excellent. And folks, if you've got additional questions, feel free to get those typed in, and we'll get into the Q&A here in just a jiffy. Okay, so if you are watching today's webinar and are seeking a continuing education unit, a CEU, please send an email today to Alena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today, and include in that email your name, the name you used to watch the webinar, if different, and then your CCA number. And Alena will get everything taken care of for you. All right. So CCA numbers were covered there. And then Matt, can you move on to the next slide?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forgot
You're good.
I still have control of the slide, so
you are.
Sorry.
So if you watch today's webinar live, we'd ask you to take a few minutes to fill out this voluntary demographic survey. It's a voluntary demographic survey for USDA funded programs. You can find the survey online at iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Or if you would like to complete that on your mobile device, go ahead and just scan the QR code there, and it will take you right to the link. We just ask that you complete one survey response for all of 2024. So if you've been watching our webinars throughout the year, I know we're in month 9 out of 12. You may have already done this. That's great. If you have not, we'd kindly ask that you take a few minutes to do that. Okay, and so next week's webinar, excited about this one. We have Dr. Hongli Feng will be presenting on agriculture and solar farms. So taking a look at preferences for utility scale solar energy in local communities. And so Hongli is with the Department of Economics and the Center for Agricultural and Rural Development here at Iowa State University. So that will definitely be a fascinating talk. So tune in next Wednesday, September 18th at noon, same time, same place. You know all the details. And then finally, one more slide, Dr. Helmers. You can always find all of our webinars archived online. So on the Iowa Learning Farms webinar, on the Iowa Learning Farms website at iowalearningfarms.org/webinars. And then a new addition this year as well, we've got a separate YouTube playlist set up looking at our webinars. So you can definitely find today's webinar we posted this afternoon, and then any previous webinars as well. Okay, so with that.
As you get the questions, I'm going to put a little plug in this afternoon at 3:10. We also have an Iowa Nutrient Research Center seminar. Dr. Troy Gilmore from University of Nebraska is going to be talking about some of their long-term trends in nitrate in Nebraska. So that'll be on virtually, as well as if you're on campus, you could stop in 1306, but Troy will be on virtually. And so you could find that on the Iowa Nutrient Research Center website. Sorry, needed to put that little plug in there too. So
very pertinent and related topic. So 3 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, so diving into our questions here, let's start out with talking about corn yield.
Yeah.
So we have a question that it appears that corn yields since about 2015 have been higher at both sites. So is that correct? And what are your speculations? What are your thoughts on why?
Yeah, so they have been. I think maybe at ADW we're getting even better with agronomic management. Um, I think that what I would say at probably in both cases, if I were to look at it, and actually we have a paper that is looked at 32 years of data from the Gilmore City site, and our corn yields, that trend is pretty much parallel to trend line corn yield increases for Pocahontas County. So our increases in yield are pretty consistent with that. And so I think, a fair bit of that is probably genetics of the system. So especially at Gilmore City, any of that increase is not because we've changed the nitrogen management. Because that has stayed the same. And so, but if if somebody wanted to get in touch, that yield increase at Gilmore City, as I said, it's a little below county averages, but the trend is very similar. So the slope of that line is very similar to Pocahontas County yield averages.
Sounds good. Okay, looking back to 2007,
Yeah,
what was the amount of nitrate loss in 2007 since the drainage water coming from the tile was very high?
yeah. Okay, 2007 okay, that would only be at Gilmore City. So let's look at it. Okay, 2000. Yes, we had our high. Oh, we had a high. So 2007, we had a lot of drainage. So we had, 20 inches of drainage. So we had about 90, really illustrates, about 90 pounds of per acre of nitrogen loss in that year, because we had such high drainage. Will illustrate that, if we compare that to 2018, which was our highest of all those years, in that year we lost about, just a little over 60. So that concentration was less in 2018, but we had, we're kind of coming off of quite a few, probably one, two, three, four of the previous 5 years were maybe more nitrate loss than the long-term average.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you ever plot drainage versus rainfall? And if
Oh, yeah.
so, do the slope and intercept of the fit through those data? Do they tell us anything interesting? What does that relationship look like?
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's really interesting. Okay. Yes, I have plotted drainage on the y-axis, precipitation on the x-axis, and they are related as we would expect. Years when we get more precipitation, we generally get more drainage. But it is interesting that um, there's a lot of variability in that because it can really depend when we get that precipitation. So we could get a year where, we get a lot of precipitation in April and May, and we're probably going to have a lot of drainage versus if we had, say, a wetter August, we could get the same annual precipitation, but if that comes in August, we're probably going to get less drainage from that equivalent amount of precipitation. So yes, we have plotted it. And in general, as precipitation increases, drainage increases, but it's fun to start thinking about how the year-to-year variability impacts that.
Sort of related, but have you observed any impacts of snowpack or winter temperatures on how that affects the trends here?
No, that is a good question. We haven't. I will say the data that we've generated is all during kind of the non-freezing conditions, because the type of monitoring we have does not it's not very conducive if you have freezing conditions for frozen pipes. But for a number of years at the different sites, we have gone through winter with heat tape around some of the sumps, where we've had where we monitored if there was winter flow, and it's been really low, at least at these sites, with our pretty intensively drained system. That is an interesting, question to start thinking about is, might we start seeing earlier drainage in Iowa than, kind of the historic because of, if we have warmer conditions. So we haven't looked at that. Something to think about for sure.
And a follow-up related question, did the 28 inches of rainfall at ADW, did that include the contribution from snowfall?
No, I guess it would not, because it would just be the rainfall. We don't have a system up there to completely account for snowmelt or snowfall. Yeah, we have a tipping bucket rain gauge at both places. That's a good question. Good point to highlight that.
Okay. In terms of the sites themselves, what can you tell us about the specifics of the cover crop, like percent of cover crop implementation and placement at both of these sites?
Okay, so for those any of those graphs I showed with cover crop, that was where the full plot would have been seeded with cover crops, either drilled or interseeded. It's kind of a long story, but at Gilmore City, we switched in 2015 from drill seeding to interseeding. In fact, we're going up tomorrow to seed at Gilmore City in the cover crops. And at Cobb's, it was drilled after harvest most years, but there was some interseeding there as well. Both cases use winter cereal rye, and both cases used glyphosate to terminate the winter cereal rye in the spring. But any of those graphs that showed the cover crop impacts, that was from plots where the whole plot was seeded with cover crops. And I would, yeah.
All right. Next question here. So these results, it indicates that developing yield resistance to drought could be important for limiting the impacts of drainage. So how do we think about developing yield resilience? Is this a place where things like drainage water recycling can come into play with treating some of the nitrogen, as well as kind of building some yield resilience? So how do we think of that resilience piece related to water quality?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I do think about things like, over time, can things like cover crops help us, long-term increase soil organic matter so that we have greater water holding capacity. So that would be one factor in there as well. If we could increase water holding capacity, we might be more resilient to those dry conditions for the crop. So that would definitely be one as we think just in field, but then managing that water. Things like controlled drainage or drainage water recycling, I think both have some potential there in trying to, you get as much water into the plant as possible versus letting that go downstream. And, the more water we could get into the plant, maybe the better nitrogen utilization that we could get with that system as well. So I do think that's a good point and something to think about there.
All right. We've got a couple questions related to residual nitrogen.
Yeah.
So first off, how available is the residual nitrogen to the crop?
Well, I think if it's in the residual nitrate form and if it's not lost, it would be available to the crop. And, now I'm sitting here thinking, and one of the things is that we have some residual nitrate from these systems that we've taken the last couple of years, and I should have summarized that, at least for the ADW site. I know we had it in 2012 and 2013, and we did have it last fall too. So now I'm thinking about that. I wish I would have thought about that and put that in here, because that might have been able to, we might have seen a different lower residual nitrate last fall than what we did in the fall of 2012.
So another question about residual nitrogen. So, what are your thoughts on how the timing of soybean versus corn residual nitrogen inputs might impact the effectiveness of like cover crops, for instance?
Yeah, that I'll have to say I don't want to go out over my skis too much because I'm not very probably not adept on kind of thinking about how that when that nitrate is get or when the nitrogen is might be cycled back into the nitrate form in that system to kind of understand or to be able to reason out differences that we might see. I will just say that especially at our Gilmore City site, I've always been intrigued at the decrease in nitrate concentration we see in the corn year where we have the winter cereal rye. Because, I've often thought the more growth we can get, the better. And before corn, we don't get as much growth, but it seems to be still very effective in reducing that nitrate concentration. And so, it may be that soybean residue, cycles quickly into the nitrate form and is susceptible to loss, maybe relatively quickly. And so that even if that rye is small, it's taking up some of that and reducing the risk of loss in that corn year.
And that actually ties in perfectly with another question wondering what's your average cereal rye biomass at the sites, and then what do you see in terms of correlation between biomass and
Okay.
nitrate leaching?
I knew somebody was going to ask me how much biomass we got, and I can't remember. I'll just say we do not get the best biomass growth, specifically at Gilmore City. And gosh, yeah. If I stop sharing here, I could probably find it here in a second. So maybe I will just do that because Emily Waring has a publication from our Gilmore City site. So, but on the other one, we did see that specifically at our at the site at the Cobb site. Matt Liebman plotted up. We have a publication in submission right now, and we did see for that continuous corn and continuous corn with cover crops years when we saw more cover crop growth, we saw greater reduction in the nitrate concentration. So there was a relationship at that site. And that was kind of cool because a lot of times there's been so much variability in the data that that relationship didn't show up, but it was pretty kind of, I would say, stark at that site.
And can you tell us about the cover crop planting dates with
Oh
your
yeah.
corn and soybean plots as well? What did the
Yep.
timing look like there?
Yeah. So it would be generally it would have been anytime that we drilled it, it probably would have been mid to late October that the winter cereal rye was drill seeded. From 15 through now at Gilmore City, the ADW site, it would have been, about this time of year that we would have interseeded that. And then for termination, it would be about a week to 2 weeks before corn planting, and probably at or probably a little bit before to a little bit after soybeans. I think we've probably gone a little bit more to green planting.
Sounds good.
So,
All right. Well, I'm gonna give us one more question just for the sake of time to wrap
okay.
up here. But last question, any thoughts on nitrogen inhibitor usage? How does that come
Okay.
into play?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think that um, uh, is important. Might reduce some of the conversion into the nitrate form. I do think though that if we think about some of these years when maybe we see high nitrate concentrations following the soybean even before we think about fertilizer inputs, that inhibitor would probably not have an impact on that because it's residual from the soybean. So I do think from a nitrogen management standpoint, it is important to do, to implement all the 4 Rs. And I think, enhanced efficiency fertilizers are important. I think there'll be, more work on that. But, I think that, we're kind of talking about incremental improvements with that, probably not the scale of improvements that we can get with something like the cover crop or different cropping rotations that we might expect.
Great, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you everyone for all the excellent questions. I know I haven't been able to cover all of them, but most of them that we got to today. So, and Dr. Helmers, thank you for the excellent information here. We'll get the webinar archived and up on the website this afternoon. And as Matt said, you're welcome to send him an email with further follow-up questions as well. So I'll turn it back over to you, Matt, for any parting words.
Yeah, because somebody did ask. So at Gilmore City, I will just say we average probably 750 kilograms per hectare. So maybe 700 pounds per acre of above ground biomass with the winter cereal rye cover crop at that site. And so we probably have some cover crop aficionados on here, and they're like, that's not very much growth. I would agree, but we still saw some benefit even with that.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you all for tuning in today. Appreciate you taking this time out of your day. And we'll be back next Wednesday with Dr. Hongli Feng looking at community implications with solar farms. So thank you all so much. Have an excellent day.